Top of the day, beautiful people. Let's start our conversation here. Oftentimes, we believe that we are too complicated. Sometimes we believe that we are too broken. Sometimes we may believe that we are too far gone. Or sometimes we believe that there's just too many versions of ourselves that have been through so much. But what I want to share with you all that you are the many versions of yourself that your survival demanded. You are the many versions of yourself that your survival demanded. Welcome back, everybody. My name is Coach Kohn. This week, we're going to be exploring one of the deepest truths about trauma and healing. You don't just have one self. There's not just one you that shows up in the world. There's not just one you that shows up in your life. Kara, happy healing to you and welcome to what is going to be an amazing conversation. Always a pleasure to see you because you hold the fort down. Thank you for all that you do. So, again, you don't just have one self, but you actually have many versions of you. And healing isn't about erasing parts of you, it's about calling all of those parts of you into holiness. WHOLE or WHOLINESS, holiness. The idea of you being one, not only within your physical consciousness, but your physical consciousness then being one with your spiritual consciousness. We'll pause that part and keep building on this idea of oneness within your physical consciousness and within your mind. So, again, if you're new here or if you're ready to take this deeper, first I want to introduce you all. I'm giving you all insight into the foundational principles upon which we've built our Trauma to Triumph Healing Challenge. Enrollment is open now, but we'll talk about that a little bit later. Let's jump into this conversation. There is a natural self that is often kind of in conflict with this fractured self, in a sense. See, when we were little, we were meant to explore ourselves. And I really want you all to think about this, and I'm going to slow down here because this requires you a little bit of depth, okay? When you were little, when we were children, we were supposed to explore these different ways of acting. We were supposed to try. We were supposed to fail. We were supposed to express. We were supposed to learn. All of these things were a part of that natural process of becoming. Through that natural exploration, your personality and your identity were meant to unfold naturally over time. But trauma interrupted that. What happens in our formative years when we experience trauma is instead of exploring yourself, you stop doing the exploring and learning of who you are becoming, and you become laser focused on protecting yourself. So instead of exploring yourself, you had to protect yourself. Instead of growing into your own character, into your own personality, you had to lock some parts of yourself away just so you could survive. You had to overemphasize certain parts of this character or these behaviors that you were learning just to survive. And in that moment, you didn't become broken, you just became layered. You didn't lose yourself, but you split yourself in order for you to survive. I'm going to give you some more in-depth understanding of that, so just be patient with me. Let's talk about how that happens. How are these protective personas even born? Think of it like this. You didn't become the strong one, or you didn't become the quiet one, or the achiever because it felt right. You didn't become those things because, oh, I wanted to be the strong person. I wanted to be the person that is the quiet, reserved one, or I wanted to be the overachiever. You didn't choose those things because they felt right. You became who you had to be in order to survive. Samaj, happy healing to you and welcome back to the conversation. Donnell, happy healing to you. Are we on the same page with that? You didn't become the person or the persona or the personality or the facade or whatever it is that you've been carrying on as your dominant self. You didn't become that because it felt right. You became who you had to be in order to survive. We'll talk about that. Let's tap into that. So, for the overachiever, right? The overachiever is often born from emotional neglect. So, what the overachiever learns is that you learn that love and safety is earned. The overachiever is often someone who was in an environment where they didn't get the affirmation or the nurturing or the love until they did right by those that were their caregivers, until they hit the mark or until they did something right. You weren't loved, hugged, or affirmed until you were doing something that they thought was worth celebrating. So what you learned was love and acceptance comes with achievements. So you become that overachiever, not because it felt right or you wanted to, but because that's who you had to be. And even though that personality may serve you in your life today, because it is born out of an unhealed trauma, there are still residual impacts that are affecting your life in ways that you may not be conscious of. So the overachiever is also very sensitive to criticism. Because out of that same drive to achieve, to prove them wrong, it's also that wound that feels sensitive to being criticized because it feels like I am not good enough again. Bettering myself, happy healing to you. And welcome back to the conversation. Here's another example. Some of us are just, we see ourselves as, I'm just a caretaker. You know, I like to take care of people, and that's what drives me. That's what gives me my sense of purpose. Well, oftentimes that caretaker is born mm, what you learn is that if you make everyone else okay, you might finally be okay too. What the caregiver normally adopts is, as long as I'm caring for someone else, I feel important. See how the caretaker or the over pleaser or the people pleaser is normally born is someone who did not receive affirmation, love, or nurturing unless they were doing something for the caregivers, unless they were doing something for the adults in their lives. So what they learn is, as long as I'm doing something for the people in my life, I am needed by them. I am important. So the caretaker or the people pleaser develops this sense of, I need to be needed. Because as long as I'm needed, I feel validated. As long as I'm needed, I feel important. As long as I'm needed, that's when I know that I'm important. So, how about the silent one? The person that is so stoic, so reserved, doesn't have much to say. The person that tends to shy away, the person that tends to not express themselves. Where did this come from? Where was this born? This is oftentimes born out of someone who had to deal with their emotions never being validated, someone who had to deal with their voice never being important enough to be heard, someone who had to learn to be silent, someone who understood that silence, or better yet, here's a more common way that we were taught this: children are to be seen and not heard. Two things are born out of children that are raised in that environment. When you tell a child for most of their childhood you are to be seen and not heard, that child is going to shrink into what we call the reserved, or the what is the term that I'm looking for? What is the term that I'm looking for? The shy reserved person. There's a term for this. It's a very common term. The What is the term that I'm looking for? Someone put it in the chat for me. Secluded, but there's a common term, the introvert. Thank you, London. Right? The introvert. So the introvert is normally born out of someone who never received emotional validation. So you learn it was safer to shut down than to speak your truth. You learn it was safer to disappear than to actually stand up for yourself. I'm only showing you how these different versions of you get developed. And then we're going to talk about how they show up and how we need to integrate them. How about this one, the aggressor or the angry person? The person that is constantly upfront, the person that is constantly confronting people. What about that individual? That is someone who has learned that attacking first meant you didn't have to feel that if you attack first, you didn't have to worry about you getting hurt. All right, we're back. I oftentimes say about the aggressor or the person that has the anger or the person that's constantly in conflict, the person that's constantly in confrontation, I often say those are the people that have the most vulnerable inner child. Those are the people that have the softest inner child. The more aggressive the protector, the more aggressive the persona, the greater the pain that we are trying to hide. That's why I have empathy for people that have nasty attitudes. That's why I have empathy for people who walk around trying to make everyone else miserable. That's why I have empathy for those people. Not because they need to be given an excuse or not because they need to be let off the hook, but because I understand this outward persona of strength, this outward persona of nastiness, that is a defense mechanism. That is somebody who has an inner child that is so vulnerable that they need that persona in order for them to feel safe. Oftentimes, we see those people and we detest them because they're so aggressive and they're so confrontational. But if you simply recognize that underneath that aggression and that confrontation is a scared inner child that is trying to be protected, you'll know how to navigate those people in a successful way. I'm not saying you have to, but if you find yourself in those types of situations and you have this understanding, it'll help you to navigate a little bit better. What am I trying to show you all? Sometimes we don't abandon the wounded parts. See, all of these parts of you that we just described, the aggressor, the silent one, the caretaker, the overachiever, those are the parts of us that we don't mind putting out into the world because those are the personas that we created to protect the wounded part. Those are the personas that we created to go out into the world because those personas felt safer to be instead of being the part of us that we now have to suppress, hide, and protect. Because sometimes we don't abandon those wounded parts. We just bury them so deep that we start pretending that they're not even there. We pretend so well that later on in our life, it literally takes someone else to go painting the picture of those parts of us showing up in our lives for us to finally acknowledge that those are parts of us that we need to deal with. I only say this because this is the work that I do. Constantly having to show people, hey, you may think that this is who you are, but I can tell you from all of the stories that you're telling me about your life and the constantly repeating the same cycle, this is who you're actually showing up as. And the reason why you don't know it is you don't realize that this version of you is a byproduct of the wound that you have not healed. You think this is you. The nasty person, the person that's constantly in confrontation, the person that's constantly in conflict with other people, they don't realize that that's a persona or a personality that they have developed to protect themselves. That person genuinely believes that that is who they are. And you want to know the messed up part about it? They don't think that they are the problem. People with nasty attitudes will often be perplexed as to why they're always in confrontations and conflict. They don't realize that it's their nasty attitude that's attracting other people with nasty attitudes. Why? Because something inside of them has them convinced that this nasty persona, this nasty personality is who I am, not realizing that that's who you are because you're trying to protect a version of you that is vulnerable, that is scared, and that is afraid. But here's the thing. No matter how far you think you bury that part of you, no matter how much you pretend, that part of you is still there and waiting. This is what I tell you all, that your inner child, and I want you to, I just want to paint this visual. I've got a 5-year-old daughter, so I'm watching princess movies and fairy tales. I got all my fairy tale characters. So now you guys are gonna have to start living with some of my analogies being fairy tale analogies, because it's a part of my life. Anyway, I often say that your inner child is trapped in the tower of your trauma. And just use the fairy tale visual of the princess, or yes, it's usually the princess, that's trapped in this high tower and is looking out the little window of the tower, hoping, wishing, praying for the knight in shining armor to ride down the sunset and come and rescue the princess from the tower of whatever, right? That's the same thing with your inner child. Your inner child is trapped in the tower of your trauma, awaiting you, the adult version of you, to come and rescue your inner child from the tower of your trauma. That version of you that you've buried, that version of you that you've learned to act like is not a part of you, that version of you does not go away. That version of you that you hide, that version of you that you're afraid of, that version of you that you resist, whatever it is that you're doing, I want you to be clear, that version of you does not go away. That version of you is waiting for safety, and that version of you is waiting to be rescued so that you can come home. And we're going to talk about, what does that rescue look like? It looks like integration. It looks like integration. I want to take a quick detour real quick, and I want to give you all some perspective here. When we are talking about multiple versions of you and you having to learn how to navigate these different versions of you, there is a reality to this conversation. And I often get this in my one-on-one sessions when clients will say, Coach, that sounds a bit like personality disorder. That there are multiple versions of me that I'm dealing with, that I'm interacting with. Let's talk about that briefly. And I'm going to be careful here because this is a sensitive matter, but I believe having this understanding will expand all of our deeper understanding of what I'm trying to teach. Okay? Stardust in the Moon. I love that name. Stardust in the Moon says that version of you will speak up when you least, come on, Stardust in the Moon. When you least expect it, when you least want that version to, when you are in the midst of something that is important, because you cannot abandon or forget or throw away parts of you. Thank you for that, Stardust in the Moon. But let's talk about this idea of personality disorder and how this relates to these concepts of you develop these different versions of yourself in order to survive. When the layers don't integrate, this is where we get these concepts and these medical conditions from. Let me show you a little bit deeper of this reflection. In healthy development, even after trauma, right? Parts of us can be separated. The protector, the wounded child, the nurturer, the achiever. But over time, with healing, those parts are meant to integrate into a cohesive self. This is the idea and the concept of being whole. This is what we're often looking for in our lives. I don't feel whole. I just want to be whole. I just want to feel complete. And we have been convinced that feeling whole and feeling complete is based on how many outward things that you can add to your life. I'll feel whole when I have the right partner. I'll feel whole when I have the right stuff. I'll feel whole when I'm doing the right career, when I'm having the right job. We have been convinced that wholeness or holiness, not your religious stuff, but the WHOLINESS stuff. We've been convinced that that entails adding stuff to your life, but it doesn't. Whole is this idea that those parts of you, all these different parts of you, are integrated, that your decision making considers the inner child. Your decision making considers all these different parts of you, and then you make a decision that serves your long-term best interest. But let's talk about what personality disorder is in relation to these concepts. In a very simplified way, personality disorders can sometimes reflect when the natural integration process is disrupted. For example, in borderline personality disorder, the inner emotional parts are often so raw and so fragmented that there's a constant battle between the abandonment terror, the rage, the shame, or whatever else this person is dealing with based on their past experiences. It's a little bit different when you're talking about dissociative identity disorder, or formerly known as multiple personality disorder. In multiple personality disorder, or now what they're calling dissociative identity disorder, trauma has caused the self, or your identity or your idea of self, to fragment into distinct identities. And this happens, listen to this carefully, and now you're going to understand the connection between personality disorder and what we're talking about. So trauma has caused the self to fragment, or caused the identity to fragment into these distinct selves as a survival mechanism. So when you talk about people, or when we have the concept of people with multiple personality disorders, we often think about this as this is just a disorder. What we don't realize is the brain is doing this so that this person can survive. The natural integration process has been disrupted by something. It could be chemical, it could be based on the environment, or it could be genetics. But it happens as a means of this person trying to survive. Here's one that is most common and that we talk about so often, and then I'm going to build this out and put this all together for you all. Even with narcissistic personality disorder, at its root, it involves the creation of this big, grandiose personality or persona to protect a deeply wounded inner child that was never allowed to integrate safely. We so commonly throw the narcissist out there, and we beat and pound on the narcissist because of the harm that they cause to so many people in their lives. Whether it's deserved or not, I'll let you determine that. But I just want to give you some insight. Even that narcissistic personality that we hate so much, that is that person's response to their trauma. That personality, that persona of that narcissist, that grandiose, I'm better than everybody, everybody is subjected to me, that is nothing more than a persona that is meant to help and protect a wounded inner child that was never loved, seen, or heard. Here's what's important. Truth, fact, real personality disorders are complex. They're complex mental health conditions that deserve the deep compassion and professional support. That is just foundation. I'm not here to tell anybody that if you need that help, go and get it. We encourage that. Okay? This teaching is not diagnosing or simplifying none of those experiences. But here's why I bring this up. The fragmented self, big or small, is at the core of your unhealed trauma. Whether you've developed a clinical disorder or simply parts of yourself that you've avoided, silenced, or suppressed, the truth is the exact same. At the core of it is unhealed trauma. Now, let me button this up for you. When you understand that what we understand multiple personality disorder to be is these versions of yourself that have fragmented as a means of you trying to survive, and that's just a severe case. If we bring this down and into our own lives, are we all not dealing with some form of multiple personalities within ourselves? And then I'm going to show you the most common display of this. Are we not all dealing with multiple personalities within ourselves? Let me give you all some example. Is the mom the same personality as the wife? Is the wife the same personality as the CEO that goes to the business? Some people may think yes. I'm going to offer you no. Because these parts of you function and have different needs. These different parts of you function and have different needs. Let me give you a good example. And I'm only saying the wife because that's what we're already using, right? The wife and the boss CEO don't have the same needs. Boss lady is going to go to work and tell everybody what they need to do because she's going to run this company successfully. When she gets home, she may not operate in that space. That might not be the personality that she brings home to take care of her kids. That might not be the personality that she brings home to her husband. Same thing for the guy, right? He might be a CEO of the big Fortune whatever company, but that's not the same guy that takes his kids to the park. That's a different part of him. Healing means inviting all of your parts to the table, not pretending that some of them don't exist. Healing means inviting all of you to the table, not pretending like some of them are you're too ashamed of for you to invite to the table. Healing means you accepting every part of you. Listen to this carefully. There's a part of you. All right, let me say this the way that it needs to be said so you all can fully grasp it. And I'll use myself as an example because it'll make it easier for you all to follow along when you don't have to question your own morality. Because if I used you as an example, many of us aren't. I'll use myself as an example so you don't have to question your own morality, okay? As a father, when I'm with my daughter, there is a version of me that is super sensitive, super in tuned to her needs, her smallest whimper, her smallest cry, gets every reaction out of me. That same man, we were at, I believe it was one of those trampoline parks. This loving, soft, This little girl got me wrapped around her finger. That's who I am as a dad. That same man, we were at a trampoline park. My daughter's a small little 5-year-old. She's most of the time the smallest in her little group. A little boy 3 times her size had bounced on one of the little boxes in the trampoline park and landed on her. That loving, kind, soft man that's wrapped around the finger of a 5-year-old. In an instant, I watched myself go from that guy to picking this kid up off my daughter like a roaring lion. I mean, in an instant, I went from, oh, that's so cute, to roar. What are you doing? And then I caught myself. Oh, he's a kid. He didn't do that on purpose. Calm down. Why am I using this example? The guy that grabbed that kid needs to exist inside of this vessel. This is the part that many of us don't really understand or talk about, but I'm going to give you this understanding now, and I'm going to continue to use myself as the example so that you all don't have to wrestle with your own morality. The guy that grabbed that kid and picked him up with complete whatever that was, he must exist inside of here. Why? How else can I protect my daughter? Why is this important, Coach? I share this with you all because I want you to understand something. What we consider or think of as the darkest parts of ourselves are a part of you that you need to embrace and understand will never go away. The guy that picked that kid up off my daughter is the same guy that if you broke in my house, it would not be a pleasant experience for you. That man must exist. The point here is we live in a society that tells us that there should be no duality because we should all be these upright citizens that do according to what society tells us we should do. That's not reality. That does not mean that we cannot all be good, decent people. But what these concepts have allowed us to live in is this space where we are forced to deny parts of our nature because we don't understand what those parts are, or we're ashamed of those parts of us. The reason I have more control over my emotions today is because I understand that every part of me exists, and listen to this, I integrate every part of me. Even the parts of me that used to live in anger and aggression and constantly living in this state of tension, I embrace that part of me. Why? Because I understand that that part of me existed for a reason. That part of me existed as a means of trying to protect a part of me that needed protection at the time. Here's what's key. By embracing that part of me, whenever something happens and I am triggered, that part of me no longer has to jump out of my subconscious mind to protect me. But because I've integrated and embraced that part of me, when something happens and that part of me is triggered, I can pause, assess the situation, and say to myself, Kohn, there's no threat here. You can calm down. We're okay. Here's why the integration of that part of me is so important, and here's how I'm going to tie the knot of why I brought up this whole thing. Because there will come a time where everything will not be okay. And that part of me needs to show up to not only protect what is the immediate threat, but to protect any future threat. By integrating that part of myself and embracing that part of myself, even though it may feel like the darker parts of me or the more aggressive parts of me, I don't have to act out those parts of myself unless necessary. And those parts of me are not jumping out of my subconscious mind because I've not integrated and understand why those parts of me exists. Does that make sense? Let me say it to you like this. If you've ever felt at war with yourself, it's not because you're broken, it's because you're fragmented. And when I say you're fragmented, it's because you have not grasped the concept that you will develop these different parts of you in order to adjust and fit into different parts of your life. Many of us are stuck because we think we are supposed to be the exact same person our entire life. And then when we realize that there are all these different versions of us that needed to exist at different points of our life, we live in a state of conflict, not knowing what to do, because society tells you you have to be the version of you that is going to fit in. So every other part of you that does not fit in, you try to figure out what to do with. And now you're in this state of not knowing who you are, not knowing how to show up, not knowing how to be authentically yourself because you have not embraced every part of you, even the darkest parts of you. The darkest parts of you are necessary. Can I say that again? Many of you think in the world of good and evil. I don't disagree with you. There are things that people do that are just flat out evil. But the reality is, it is the outcome of your actions that determine what we label it as, not the action itself. Whole nother conversation that we can have, but I'll simplify it to this. We will excuse the same behavior out of one person because of their title and then punish the next person because they don't have that same title, but it's the same behavior. I'll give you a simple breakdown of this. If a soldier or an officer does it, we celebrate it. It's all unaliving someone. It's still unaliving someone. But depending on who does it, we celebrate it. As if that person is not an unaliver. So even though they're doing it to protect society or whatever their means of doing it is, that person is still an unaliver. Are they good or evil? Because what is the determining factor of good and evil if it's all still unaliving? It's the reason that we give to it. So let me give you all this really deep example. In this country right now, there are things that we are okay with people doing on our behalf that on the other side, if someone else was doing those things to this country, we will call those people evil. But we don't consider ourselves evil as we do it to other people. Let me not get stuck here. If you've ever felt at war with yourself, I want you to understand it's not because you're broken. It's not because you have some psychological issue. It's not because you need to go see someone. And if you do, please do go. But oftentimes it's because you're fragmented. But there is a path to being whole again. And that's where integration work matters. Because integration is about understanding that every part of me that has ever existed was necessary. Here's the thing. Every part of me that have ever existed was necessary. If I don't operate in that understanding, there are parts of me that will only always operate out of my subconscious mind when I am triggered. I will never have control of those parts of me because I've never integrated those parts of me. So to the point that I was just making about understanding that duality exists even inside of your vessel, if you never embrace what you may consider is your darker side, you'll never have control of that side of you. Does that make sense to you all? If you never embrace what you may consider your darker side, you will never have control of that side of you. So whenever something happens and that side of you is triggered, that side of you is just going to act outside of your conscious control. You'll never be able to pause, assess, and make the decision that serves your long-term best interest if you never integrate a part of you. The pause and assess only works with parts of you that you've integrated with. Does that make sense to you all? Purple hearts in the chats, please. So again, when you understand this, then you understand why integration is so important. You understand why inner child healing matters. And that's why the work we do inside the Trauma to Triumph Healing Challenge is so important. We're not just fixing it. We're not trying to fix it. We're not trying to fix your broken state. We're not trying to fix your fractured state. We're reuniting you with yourself. That's what inner child healing is. You've been living in this fractured state of your inner child carrying the wound and your adult self carrying the pain. Your adult self has your ambition, your dreams, and your desires, and the things that you want for your life. Your inner child has your doubts, your limiting beliefs, and the things that you never want to experience again in your life. And the problem is, because these two parts of you are not integrated, when something happens in your adult life that looks like what your inner child has been trying to avoid, your inner child gets triggered and reacts without your adult supervision or without your adult permission. So what happens? We often find ourselves acting in a way that does not serve our long-term best interest because my actions right now are not based on my adult mind and my understanding. My actions right now are based on my past experience that is being triggered in this moment. Samaj says, integration, green lights, necessary crash outs, right? I love that question. You know why I love that question? Because first of all, Samaj has actually participated in our Trauma to Triumph Healing Challenge. So she's aware of some of these concepts and these ideas and these principles. But I love that question because I know how Samaj takes this information and integrates it into her reality because she's looking for real life applications. And that's what you're supposed to do with this information. So to the question, Samaj, integration green lights necessary crash out, right? For those of you that don't fully understand what Samaj is saying, now that I've integrated the parts of me that usually defends me, through my integration, if I need to crash out, meaning I need to go off, because I've integrated, my going off should be okay at that point, right? And let me answer that question in the most teacher way that I can. Two answers. Yes, and let me explain the yes first, and then I'm going to tell you the no. The yes is, after your integration, when you're triggered in this present moment, if something in this present moment triggers your past experience, and the version of you that normally protects you, that normally looks after you and makes sure nobody takes advantage of you, and that version of you says, Samaj, this moment looks like these previous moments that I have been protecting us from. I think I need to protect us right now, and I need to do it in a way that gets this person away from us, or whatever the case may be. The reason I say yes is because you're now integrated, that emotion, you see what I did? I interpreted the emotion as a whole sentence. Listen to what I just did with the emotion. We're being triggered right now, right? But the emotion said, Samaj, this situation looks like what I've been protecting us from all of our life. We need to address this because it feels and looks like what this was. Everything that I just said is just an emotion. Because as I'm being triggered in this moment, the emotion that arises is the emotion from the past experience. Now, because Samaj has been through our Trauma to Triumph Healing Challenge before, she knows, Samaj, what are your emotions? And what are they telling you? Anybody else has been through the challenge that wants to answer this? What are your, come on, information? Information. So, if I'm being triggered in this moment, but I've done my integration, Samaj, in the moment that I am triggered, this moment triggers me. The emotions arise. But because I see my emotions as information, I interpret the information. What is my interpretation of the information? Samaj, this moment reminds me of that past moment. That's why this emotion is rising, because this moment reminds me of the past moment. And I think we need to address this moment because it feels like the past moment. Because you've done your integration work, that conversation or those emotions are bringing you information. Now, what are you doing with that information, Samaj? You're assessing it. You're going, you know what? This person is trying to play with me. This person is trying to play us. They are trying to trick us. They are trying to take advantage of us. Now, watch why I said yes, Samaj. Because you've done the assessment and your emotions are not giving you directions, but they gave you information. You paused, you assessed the emotion, you validated the emotion by attributing the emotion to the situation and doing an accurate assessment. Now that you've done the assessment, what are you going to do? Respond in a way that serves your long-term best interest instead of responding in a way that would have felt like a direction from your emotions. So that is a yes. And the reason I say yes, and to the point of your direct question, it's not a crash out anymore. When I'm integrated with the part of me that needs to defend me, when that emotion come up, Kohn, we need to defend ourselves, I pause. I assess the emotion as information. I assess the situation based on what the emotion has shown me. And then I make a decision not based on the emotion, but based on what serves my long-term best interest. And that is normally not a crash out. So yes, when you have integrated, the crash out is no longer a crash out, but it is a tempered response based on what serves your long-term best interest. So Maj, let me give you another nugget for everybody. What I just explained to you is what many people struggle with. It's called emotional maturity. That's what this inner child work does. That's why many people struggle with emotional maturity or how to govern their emotions. It's because the emotion is not from the situation that they're currently living in. The emotion is more powerful than the current situation that they're living in. Why? Because the emotion that they're taking directions from is based on something that has happened in their past, and their response is trying to protect them from the perceived threat of their past. So they crash out. Because the crash out is not even about the present moment. The crash out is about the fear of you doing to me what my trauma says is about to happen. The reason we think about it. Why would you crash out at a job that pays your bills, but we see people do it every single day, and you just look at them like, that was so stupid. And while they're crashing out, you can tell that there's not, you will literally work with a person for 6 years, and you think you know this person, and one day they show up and just lose their entire mind. And you're like, no. Sally didn't do that. Sally didn't come in here and curse everybody out and knock over. No way. That is not her. You're right. It's not her. is a part of her that she may have not fully integrated that was threatened. And that part of her being threatened said, Sally, we must protect ourselves at all costs. And this is what protection looks like. And because Sally doesn't understand what Samaj and most of my clients know, that your emotions are meant to give you information and not direction, whenever Sally is triggered and her emotion says, crash out, what does Sally do? She crashes out because she still doesn't have emotional maturity, because she still doesn't have healing from her childhood wound that is still giving her emotional directions instead of information. So if you ever see a person that struggles with emotional maturity in their big age, if you ever see a person in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, and they cannot seem to control their emotions, just sit back and watch. That's their trauma. That's the personality that they have developed to protect their trauma, giving them directions in how to behave in this moment so that they can feel safe. Remember, the first law is self-preservation, not keep your job, not keep your relationships, not make people respect you, self-preservation. So when you have not integrated your wound, and that wound is still trying to preserve you, that wound will destroy your relationships, will destroy your family, will destroy your jobs, will destroy everything in your life, thinking that it's preserving you. All right, let me get off of this and get back to where we were. All right. I wanted to touch on that real quick just because I felt like it was important to give you all that foundation in how these ideas and concepts of integrating multiple parts of yourself relate to the concepts of personality disorder. It is literally, personality disorder is the extreme version of what I'm describing to you all. We all experience this. Personality disorder is just the extreme version of it. Many of us are in this smaller versions of it, but it is ruining our lives because we have not fully integrated all these versions of ourselves so that I am making a singular whole decision that serves my long-term best interest. Why does it feel so scary, coach? It's because if you've locked away parts of yourself to survive, going back to retrieve them feels like inviting danger again. If you've locked away parts of yourself, or if you've repressed, or if you've hidden parts of yourself, or if you're ashamed, or if you've been ashamed of these parts of yourself, and now we're teaching you how to go back and integrate with these parts of yourself, well, those parts of yourself represent the fear of why you hid them in the first place. So maybe parts of you carry shame. You did things in your past that you are very much ashamed of, that you've been made to feel small and disgusting about. So now you've hidden and repressed those parts of yourself. And now that we're telling you to embrace all of you and embrace every part of you, you're looking at those parts of yourself like, nah, that's not me. It feels dangerous. It brings back the shame. It brings back the hurt. Why? Because your subconscious learned that feelings hurt. Remembering this is unsafe. One of the most common things that clients will explain to me is, Coach, I don't want to remember because I'm afraid of how much I'm going to remember. I don't want to remember because if I touch that thing, it may break me. I pushed it as far as I did because that is where it is safe. If I open that box, Coach, whatever may come out of that box, I may not survive. So you fight it. And you protect the part of you that you've hidden, that you've abandoned. And you protect that part of you even from your own healing. You're protecting the wound because that's what you've done your entire life. I sometimes will sit across from a client And I am advocating for you, your well-being, because I'm listening to the stories that you're telling me. And once we pinpoint what the thing is, I watch people fight for the thing while I'm fighting for them. I watch people fight me so that they can hold on to the narrative that does not serve them, but it feels safe. Clients will tell me, Coach, I need to know that I'm not good enough. Why? Because that's how I feel safe. The moment that I start believing that I could be good again, Coach, that makes me vulnerable to the disappointment that I've been running from my entire life. That makes me vulnerable to the pain and the hurt that I have just hit. I just got over that pain and hurt, Coach. Now you want me to make myself vulnerable again? I can't. So healing feels dangerous when all you've known is survival. Healing feels dangerous when all you've known is just making it. Healing feels dangerous when what is familiar to you is your pain, is your trauma. When your trauma is your norm, everything else seems dangerous. Except, receive that for a second. When trauma is your norm, peace seems dangerous. Listen to this. When being mistreated is your norm, somebody genuinely trying to love you seems dangerous. All right. What can we do about all of this, Coach? Let's start here. Healing is not about picking which version of yourself wins. Healing is not about deciding which version of you want to show up as. Healing is about integrating, and it's about being whole. It's about wholeness. You're not getting rid of the wounded child. This work that we do with inner child healing is you will never get rid of your wounded inner child. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to offer them the safety they've always deserved. You, being the knight in shining armor, going to rescue your inner child from the tower that you've built, it's not about getting rid of that inner child, but letting them know that they don't have to keep reacting as if there's danger everywhere. Letting your inner child know that the environment that produced that pain no longer exists. Many of us don't understand why it seems like we keep repeating the same stagnant processes and we just can't go past this certain space in our lives. That's because all of your behavior is based on survival. Coach, I'm ready to step into the next I'm ready to step into the next era of my life, but I just can't get it. I just feel stagnant. Well, let's think about how you've learned to live. Many of us only learned how to survive because the people that taught us life were just surviving. Many of our life habits are simply survival habits. Our money habits are for survival. The way that we eat is simply for survival. The way that we perceive information is simply for everything about our lives is just for us to survive. And here's the thing about survival. We celebrate having survived trauma or great obstacles in our lives, but life is not supposed to be lived in survival mode. Do you understand that if you're in survival mode, it literally means you're in fight or flight? That's what survival is. A constant life of trying to figure out if I will survive, will I make it? Will I be okay? That is not life, y'all. But that's how we've been taught. We've been taught to live in a constant state of survival. You're not getting rid of the wounded child. You're offering them the safety they always deserve. You're not erasing the protector. You're inviting them to lay down their sword. You're not erasing the version of you that has been protecting you all of your life. You don't have to erase that version of you. You know why? Because there will come a time when that version of you needs to step up to protect you with more knowledge, with more wisdom, with more calm, with more peace, with more understanding, with all of the other parts of you. What integration is. Listen to this. This version of you that has been your protector, that has been wielding the sword, getting rid of everything that has posed a threat to your life. This version of you has been operating without all the other aspects of you that's needed. That's why when you're triggered, the only part of you that is acting is that protective version of you. That's why normally, whatever that protective version of you does, there's usually some regret around it because the smart version of you was not included. The in-tuned version of you was not included. But when you're integrated, and you need your sword-wielding protector to go out there, your sword-wielding protector also goes out there with the intelligent version of you, with the calm version of you, with the in-tuned version of you, with the knowledge, with all of you. When you're integrated, you don't just send out your protector, but every part of you goes out and engaged in the situation, even though your protector is in the front. But your protector is not operating with just a sword to go destroy things, but your protector is operating with your wisdom. Your protector is operating with your compassionate side. Your protector is operating with your intuitive side. So the actions that you are now taking benefits all of you. And that's what I mean by making a decision that serves your long-term best interests. Does that make sense to you all? Purple hearts in the chat if it does. Samaj, come on. Samaj says, knowing people are only trying to protect themselves, you lead with compassion and not combativeness. Here's something that I want you all to think about. 90% of the time, when you see two people arguing, that's their trauma, just going back and forth. 90% of the time when we argue, it's not about the thing in the present moment. We're arguing because parts of us have been triggered, and now those parts of us are showing up. And now that both of us, our triggers are having a conversation, not even me and you. Most of the time when people are arguing, the two cognitive individuals, the two adults are not there. That's why you'll see people jump out of their car in the middle of traffic with kids in their car and start a whole fight in the middle of the street. And you're thinking, wait. I literally saw a video the other day. The guy jumped out of his car and literally it was like 3 lights. He kept jumping out and attacking this other person's car. But do you know what he was saying as he was attacking the other guy's car? I have kids in my car. You cut me off. I've got kids in my car. Do you see them? Look at my kids. And I'm thinking to myself, bro, you are out of your car risking your life. And you want me to believe that this is about you protecting your children? It's not. I want y'all to literally think about that. This man was out of his car. Essentially, confronting another driver because he was saying, I'm infuriated because you endangered my kids. Sir, you are causing more danger to your kids by jumping out of your car and attacking this man. I watched that video and I understand that that man in that moment, his actions have nothing to do with his children. That's a trigger. That man is being triggered by something else. Because why else would you endanger your children's lives under the idea that you're trying to protect them? It makes no sense. His decision, watch this, let's connect the dots now. His decisions were not serving his long-term best interest. Do you know why? Because it was his trigger. There was something, his wound, the persona that he had created to protect that wound, that persona was acting in its own right. That man was not present in that moment. But that's the disconnect. So the idea here is we're not trying to get rid of the wounded child. We're not trying to get rid of the protector. You're not abandoning the parts that carried you. You're just letting them rest. You're letting your protector rest because your life is not in survival mode. Hey, that part of you will be needed one day. Just not every day. We don't heal by destroying the parts of us that once served us. We heal by bringing the whole family home. We heal by becoming whole. Think about it. When something is shattered, it becomes many pieces. Healing isn't pretending that it wasn't shattered. Healing is gathering all the parts of you and making them whole again. That's integration. That's transformation. And that's exactly why I created the Trauma to Triumph Healing Challenge. This isn't just surface level mindset work where we kind of change your mind and make you look at things differently. No, it is a 12-week step-by-step journey to help you find the parts of you that you've buried to survive, to help you to create safety and welcome all of those parts of you back, and to build a new story where all of you belong. A story where your protector does not have to be on constant guard, but you can call on that part of you when it is necessary. We are still open for enrollment for another 2 weeks before we get to week number 6 and close enrollment until the next challenge, which will be in June. You can still use the promo code FIRMDECISION2025 to save a significant amount on your enrollment. Again, we're only open for enrollment of the Trauma to Triumph Healing Challenge for 2 more weeks. The truth is simple. You don't need to be more. You just need to become whole again. So if you're ready, you can check out the link in my bio or check out the link in the description of this video to join the challenge. Your future self is already waiting to thank you. For those of you that have been joining us today on YouTube, I thank you for being a part of this important conversation. Please do like and subscribe to the page, so as well as turn on your notification bell so that you're notified whenever we release new content. I love you all. Stay tuned in for more meaningful conversations such as this one. And as always, happy healing.